Brew Davis, welcome to my very first podcast. I think this will be a lot of fun. And we were just talking a second ago about how each of us have explored our own personal limits. And I want to ask you a little bit more about that. But one of the things as I've thought about my own adventures is it goes way back into early years. So if you would just, you and I have a little bit of history, mostly starting in college, but tell me what growing up was like for you.
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me. It's fun to be the inaugural Self podcast.
There you go.
But I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and had a pretty suburban childhood. Had a very suburban childhood, and I would say was pretty privileged. I went to private schools all the way through until I went to UNC Chapel Hill, where we met, and that's not your typical public school, but I would go play tennis and go to the swimming club in the summer, and just was really spoiled. I wasn't spoiled in the sense that I'd like to think I didn't expect things or didn't have a sense of entitlement, but I definitely got a lot of the things that come with wealth and privilege. I got a great education in high school and even primary school, elementary school. But yeah, I grew up in Nashville, which is a neat place to grow up. It's blown up now recently, but all the way, even back in the 80s, it was just really cool. And a lot of my friends' parents, dads in particular were songwriters or involved in the music industry, country music. And I didn't wasn't around it on a daily basis, but I was around it enough that I identified with it and was part of who I was and who I've become. And my dad's office, he had a travel agency for years, and it was 3 doors down from the Bluebird Cafe, which is an iconic Nashville songwriters.
That's super cool.
Venue. And that was just I don't know, ordinary to me at that point. So anyway, I had a very happy childhood, I would say, but I wouldn't say there was anything that pushed me toward adventure. That was pretty absent in my childhood.
So I don't remember which album this was on, maybe you're the one from a couple years ago, but you've got a song on there called Harpeth River Road, I think.
Yeah.
I just listened to that this morning. Was that autobiographical, or were you using the setting? Obviously, having lived in Franklin for 4 years, I know the Harpeth River Road and played in the Harpeth River several times. So it resonated with me, but was that part of your childhood?
Yeah, it was part of my high school, I would say. We didn't get too out of control down there, but we definitely, the rope swing was everybody knew where the rope swing was. And that was a really common thing to do in the summer, was go down to the rope swing and play in the river, and then usually go back to somebody's house and hang out for dinner or whatever. But that song I wrote was about change as much as anything, and about how Nashville's changed, but really everywhere's changed. And it wasn't entirely, it was autobiographical, but I took some creative license too, because the third verse talks about a friend of mine who went to Iraq and lost his life. And I actually played tennis with the guy that I named in that song a couple of weeks ago. So he's not dead, fortunately. But I think
All right, it's a good line.
Yeah, it is. I did have some good friends that served in Iraq. They were ROTC and went on to serve in Iraq. And I had friends who had, I would say, died really young from it was really peculiar. Some of my classmates one guy had cancer at a really young age and passed away in his mid-20s. And another guy, actually 2 other guys that I knew growing up, committed suicide, and another guy drowned in a lake accident. It was really odd. When I think back on it, I don't remember other grades. It's not like my sister's grade. She was 3 years young. I'm not sure she has any. It's just weird how that happens. Sometimes it happens in threes, so to speak. But anyway, so that's where I got the idea of change in the form of death, and blended the fact that several of the guys that I knew served overseas in the Army or the Marine. And so anyway, that's where that. But yeah, we were down at Harpeth River in the rope swing all the time. And one time we even camped out in a field that we thought was our friends, and it turned out it belonged to Billy Ray Cyrus, the guy that was a big country music star in the 90s that wrote Achy Breaky Heart. And so he came riding up on horseback with like a ranch foreman or something. And
No
he was very
way.
friendly. Yeah. He was like super, just, hey guys, I don't mean to be difficult, but you're actually in my field. And we were like, oh man, we're really sorry. Like we thought it was like a fluke thing where our friend who we were supposed to be camping out with got sick, and he was like, yeah, you can go out there anyway, but we were just one field over. So, but
Oh my
anyway,
gosh.
that was like, you see stuff like you run into I used to see Alan Jackson at like little kids recitals, and Waylon Jennings' son was in my class in high school, and he came to the parent teacher orientation and was like walking across campus. Was like, oh my
Are you
goodness,
serious?
that's way. Yeah, so stuff like that was really different and pretty cool. But you just take it for granted because in fact, my uncle, his dad was Jack Anglin, who was from Johnny and Jack Anglin, were a country duo that's I believe in the Country Music Hall of Fame, but they were like huge, successful artists back in the 50s and 60s. And my uncle grew up going out on stage at the Grand Ole Opry or hanging out behind the curtains backstage on Saturday nights. And so I think probably maybe had a little more, I was bumping up against music a little more than most people would in Nashville,
Absolutely.
but it was pretty cool.
It makes so much more sense now that you have made music part of your life. I've known that whether it's dabbling or a hobby, and then you got into putting out your own records, that's a little more than a hobby, but it makes a lot of sense now because those experiences are not normal for most kids growing up. And
Yeah.
I'm sure it normalized it enough for you that it just became one of those things like, yeah, why don't I do it?
Yeah, I think it probably did. And I think I just came from a place of really liking the music more than anything. And I didn't grow up particularly musical. I didn't take piano lessons or violin lessons. I just was more of a fan. And like in college, I worked as an intern for this Christian artist named Chris Rice. And
Did you really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he actually came over. You would have graduated, but my senior year, he came over and did a concert that I arranged at North Carolina. But I did that one summer right before my senior year. And then the following year, during my senior year, I interned at Sugar Hill Records, which is a bluegrass
I do remember
label.
that.
Yeah. And our friend Dane Lee helped me get that gig. But then I just happened to be there at the right time, and they had someone leave the company, and they brought me on. And I was, I didn't have a clue what I was doing when I was working there. I just was so inexperienced and young, but it was amazing, and I did learn a lot. And
you got to meet Alison Krauss, didn't you?
No, I don't think I met her, but I met a lot of I met Dolly Parton and Nickel Creek, Chris Seeley and them, and Del McCoury. And it was a pretty big time for bluegrass because Nickel Creek I've got a gold record from that time when I worked there.
I love Nickel Creek.
Yeah, they're great. And then they had the Oh Brother Where Art Thou movie come out that the Coen brothers did, and that really blew up and got a lot of attention for Dan Tyminski and Gillian Welch and all the people that were on there. Alison Krauss was on that album. And so I think and the other part of it, going back even farther musically, like I grew up in a Church of Christ, which is it's a real conservative, historically real conservative Christian denomination, but they don't use instruments. So you learn, like, it's a cappella singing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to read. Even there's a real old fashioned type of music called shape note singing. And I didn't learn that, but that was like in our hymnals, and my grandfather and my uncle were both song leaders at their churches. And so I think I knew pretty early. I knew I had a pretty good voice. I'm not like a three tenors type of, or like somebody that's just got a real booming voice, but I can carry a tune pretty good and good enough to deliver the songs. And then my high school where I went was really a wonderful school academically, and particularly with regard to the English classes, like they have you have to write a lot and study poetry and all of these kind of classical things. And so I got to be I was by no means the smartest student, but I think I got combining all of those things, like the music business that I worked in, and the fact that I grew up learning how to sing, and the fact that I was fortunate to have this really good education that taught me about poetry and alliteration internal rhyme and all these things like made it without realizing it. I was learning how to write and yeah, putting that all together with the finished product being that I'm a halfway decent songwriter. I'd like to think.
Yeah, you are. You absolutely are. And it's really neat to look back and see those mile markers along the way that seem maybe irrelevant or not making a whole lot of sense at the time, but they all point in the same direction. All of that built on itself to get you to where you're at. And just from an outsider looking in, it seems like you're really enjoying that part of your life, music and songwriting and performing.
Yeah, I think I'm not like, I don't take it for granted that I'm lucky to have the time to do it or that I have had the time to do it, because I really don't think, like, I was a teacher for 7 years and I stopped teaching and started working with Jen 9 years ago now. And when I did that, it was a kind of a leap of faith for us, but it really just freed up all this time. Like I didn't start writing until I would say 7 years ago. And
right?
It was because of working with Jen that like I had the time and the energy to at least put a little bit into it and get started. And not everybody has that. Like that's a luxury it's a luxury to have the time to do it. And it's also a luxury. And to be fair, like I made the time. I would stay up until 1 or 2 a.m. to write songs and stuff. But I wouldn't have done that if I was teaching. I would have been in bed because I would just know how challenging the day was. And working with Jen and with that part of things has been a lot more. I'm sitting on our deck right now and just you hear cars drive by every now and then, but for the most part I'm just in this canopy of trees, and it's a lot quieter than a classroom of 20 kids would be and teaching sophomore history or English.
Yeah, your blood pressure is probably quite a bit lower as well.
It's so much lower, except when our kids are here, but they're not.
That pushes it back up.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a really neat summary, because I met you on the tail end of a lot of that. So like any friends that you meet in college, there's very little that you know about what got people there. And that's really interesting to hear about that. Let me ask you one thing further about growing up. Again, I know you lived at Miss D's in college. Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. And I know a lot of those guys at different levels, they like getting out and hiking and backpacking, doing different things. But what's the first thing that you remember? What's the first adventure that you remember going on? Any details around that?
I did some stuff in high school, and I remember I did some mountain biking, and I go out with friends on the weekends. The two that I remember the most are one night we camped out in a state park in Tennessee, and I had one of those old Coleman sleeping bags, and I was like, oh, that's not going to be good enough. And also it doesn't look cool. It doesn't look like a mummy type of sleeping bag. And I found this other one in our attic that was a mummy sleeping bag, and I brought it with me, and we got in the tent that night, and it was cold. It was like in the teens, and I pulled that sleeping bag out, and it was like a foot too short. Like it was like a sleeping bag that my sister had used like when she was in 4th grade or something. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. So I was just freezing all night. That was not a good beginning. And then the other thing that was even crazier was I was like, I think probably a senior, maybe the summer before my senior year of high school. And I had a friend who I just saw him a couple of weeks ago, and he's real outdoorsy. He hiked the Appalachian Trail, and he took a break from college and hiked it. And he was versed in a lot of different outdoor sports. But we went to Stone Door, which was a popular climbing spot on the Cumberland Plateau between Nashville and Chattanooga. And he and I and a third friend rock climbed this, 50 or 60 foot rock face. But in hindsight, I just cannot believe that I walked out the door that day and was just like, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm going to go rock climbing with Raleigh and Drew. I'll see you tonight. And they're like, okay. And they didn't ask any questions. Yeah, it was like we were 17 years old, and maybe they didn't know, and fortunately, I think Raleigh really knew what he was doing. I think he did, but I didn't vet him. I wasn't
Yeah.
like, well, okay, now what kind of training do you have here that
Yeah.
you're going to be in charge of holding me if I fall from a 60-foot cliff? And there's just stupid things like that that are almost like that. That's every boy that grew up
Yes.
anywhere. I feel like in the South or Midwest or out wherever has stories of I can't believe I'm alive because of
Yes.
all the stupid because of that bridge I jumped off in
Seemed like
high
a good
school.
idea.
That was 100. Yeah. So anyway, I remember that, and that was like just not the smartest decision, but here I am. So it worked out, and I think those are some of the big things. I didn't backpack until freshman orientation of college. And I remember
Really?
going on I went on the Appalachian Trail. We did, I think it was maybe a 3-day trip from Max Patch, north of Smoky Mountain National Park, down to Hot Springs. And I was like a 3-day, 2-night. And then I think afterward we did a rafting trip or two or something like that. And then went back I started at Davidson College and went there for a couple of years. But when we got down into Hot Springs, I remember like popping out into town and being like, oh man, that was great, but I'm glad to be here. And I'm glad it was over, but it was also like we came out into town, and that was really because you'd just been surrounded by trees and mountains for days. But what's amazing to me is that now we own the house. That's the first house that you pop out into town, and you literally walk past our backyard, and then you take a hairpin turn and you walk down the sidewalk into town. And I remember walking down those stairs, and if you kind of like, if I think about it's a double wide trailer that we bought, and we call it the Appalachian trailer because it's a bunkhouse for our guiding company. But it probably was right there when I was hiking, was probably like one of the first years that it would have been there based on the records of when it was put up and things like that. So, but it's just crazy that the way that life circles back around, and now we own that place, and I just so vividly remember it. And it's like it's almost like a cow brand that's just been put on my life with the Appalachian Trail being such a big part of what we do now.
I did not know that you started at Davidson College. You went there 2 years?
Yeah, I went there, freshman and sophomore year, and it was great, but it was just too much like my high school. And from where I was, like going to Chapel Hill felt, oh, this is so big, and this is a leap, and I'm going to be broadening my horizons. And I did, but at the same time, Chapel Hill's, there's a lot of schools bigger than Chapel Hill, and there's certainly a lot of schools that don't feel quite as, most of the people that we knew, I think, were very successful academically and motivated and all of that stuff. So anyway, but I started at Davidson, and I did enjoy it, but I realized I wanted to go to a bigger school. That's all that's the only reason why I left.
Gotcha. Now, so the backpack trip on the AT was part of your orientation?
Yeah. It was like a
That's
freshman
amazing.
orientation with a group of 8 or 10 other freshmen that I think we met at campus, and they drove us. It's only 2.5 hours from Davidson up here, and we drove up in a van, and then did the hike, and then we finished the hike, and then did a rafting trip. And I don't remember if we did anything else, but it was like a 4 or 5 day kind of trip. And they called it the Odyssey, which to me is really funny because Jen's trail name is Odessa. It was like the first part of, and then they would, back at campus, they would do more of the traditional freshman orientation stuff and talk about classes and your dorm and things like that. So.
Yeah, that's a little different than my experience with orientation in Chapel Hill. Nothing that adventurous for sure.
Yeah, it was cool, but it was definitely the first time I'd been on a backpacking trip, and
So did you feel like you got the bug for it, or it was like, oh, that was cool, I finished it and feel good about myself? But
it definitely wetted my whistle. Like I didn't ever, I don't know. I think I've had all this stuff happen in stages with the hiking, and I definitely, like, freshman and sophomore year, I'd go camp out sometimes on my own and go up toward the mountains and do that. But I didn't think about through hiking the Appalachian Trail until I met Jen. And I would go, like, when I lived, I had some wanderings. So I worked at that record label for a year and a half or so, and then just really had a lot of wanderlust. And I realized this is cool, but it's still an office job, and I'm not sure I want an office job right now. So then I moved to Switzerland for a couple of years and worked with this Christian organization like Young Life, but it worked in the international schools. And then I was also working as a youth pastor at a church for a couple of years. But then I moved back to Nashville. And while I was in Nashville, when I was teaching, I would go out west in the summers. And that's where I really think I started. I don't know why. I guess probably Switzerland had as much to do with it as anything. Because
were you in the Alps?
Yeah, pretty much. I lived in Geneva, but
okay.
Every free day, like every day off, I was hiking. Like I would go over towards Chamonix and near Mont Blanc, or I would go into the Valais and go towards Zermatt, or I would go up toward Interlaken and the area, what's called the Bernese Oberland. And the train tickets were like dirt cheap, and for if you were under 25 years old. And so you could actually get a pass and just pay like $100 for the year, and then just go wherever you wanted to go after 7 o'clock at night. So we would take a train over,
amazing,
and then camp out, and then wake up the next morning and hike 10 miles, and then catch the train back after 7 o'clock and be there for work the next day. And so that's definitely the place that it like kickstarted the most, because then when I came back to Nashville, all I wanted to do in the summers was go out west and visit national parks and national forests and hike. Yeah, and even then I wasn't like interested in long distance hiking. I think that was just like something that, I don't know. I think partly it was like, I don't know if I can do that, or if I even want to do that, like showers and having somewhere to come back to, like a base camp. But also it had to do with the time. It was like that to hike the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail would take 4 or 5 months. So I don't know that when I would do it anyways. But then when I met Jen, and I'd been thinking I was outdoorsy, and I wanted to meet someone that was outdoorsy. And then I met her, and then it was like, oh my gosh, like she's a lot more outdoorsy than anyone that I thought I would fall in love with. But then I totally drank the Kool-Aid, and she did the Appalachian Trail the summer after we got married. And actually that was right after our honeymoon that she did the Appalachian Trail in 2008. And then the next summer we did the Colorado Trail, which is almost 500 miles. And that was my first long distance trail. And then I really just was hooked on the freedom and how lightweight it was. And like being able to, you want to talk about a sense of accomplishment. There's something about a construction project or like trail maintenance where you start the morning and you do things, and then you look back 6-8 hours later and you're like, I can't believe that we knocked all that out. And on a long distance trail, like a Pacific Crest Trail, you literally start in Mexico and you hike up to Canada. Like that's pretty impressive. And I haven't done that yet, and I'm hoping someday too, but I've done 3/4 of the Appalachian Trail as a section hike. So that's a good start.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. The question that comes to mind doing that, because I'm like, I haven't done the Colorado Trail or the PCT, but I've seen pictures. And so I have these images when you say those things of what sections of those trails look like. And that does something to me. So my question to you is, what do you learn about yourself when you're out there? What are the things that you find most inspiring and that you get out of doing something like that?
I think the main thing is that you can do hard stuff, and that they're really, I don't know of a better metaphor for life than a long distance trail, because, and that can include trail running and ultra marathons, which is something I've done as well and really enjoy. But like the obstacles and the challenges that you face every day, whether it's gaining 5,000 feet of elevation over the course of a morning, or fording a river or getting stung by bees or losing something and having to adapt. Like I lost a hiking pole. Now, how am I going to put my tent up if my tent needs 2 hiking poles? There's just, and all of those are those are the challenges. Then there's also the days that are just like where the weather's what it is right now on my porch, and I'm looking and the leaves are just quivering and it's 73 degrees and I can hear the insects and the birds chirping. And so you come out to these places where there's the types of views that you only see on a screensaver, and which screensavers are the worst. Like I hate screensavers. I appreciate them because I know everybody wants to have these ideas and to see beauty, but it's not real. Like the reality, what happens is like people see that and they're like, oh yeah, that's what it is. And then you get people go into national parks and they take a picture of that. And then we were at Old Faithful last summer and all these people were watching it, and there's 1,000 people there, and literally before it was finished, people started walking away. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, this is the most amazing guys are on the planet, and you're like, you got your 10-second
already done
clip of a video, and now you're going to the buffet line. And I think it just creates this like really disingenuous connection with nature, that we think there's not going to be bugs and it's not going to be humid and there isn't discomfort. And so then we see that stuff and we think this is what it's supposed to be. And it's not really. You have to embrace the whole thing. And that's life. Like life.
That's so good.
To get back to the long distance thing, it's just, you have ups and downs. You have good days and bad days. You have challenges. You're going to have times where you're sick. You're going to have times where you feel incredible, but you keep moving. Like you have to keep moving. You have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I think that's what Jen, my wife, is like. She's a speaker and she relates the trail to life and to business. And I think that's why her stories and her messages resonate so well, really, with everyone, is because it's just a natural metaphor. And it's such a powerful one. But more than anything, what the trail has taught me is how to be tough and how to like keep moving and stand up and just put one foot in front of the other. And sometimes that's all you can do. And actually, Jen has a short documentary film that's 14 or 15 minutes long, and it was in some of those outdoor film festivals. But the title of it came from a quote that I gave, which was like, it's called Positive Forward Motion. And I said, sometimes that's all you can do. Like you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other and see what happens, because what else are you going to do? You're not just going to sit there by the trail. That's not an option. And so I think the older I get, the more I realize like you just keep moving and you keep, and sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, but eventually it's going to get better. And you're not going to get there unless you keep moving.
Well, that positive forward motion.
Yeah.
I totally get that. And I can like feel the weight of that being a life mantra. The other thing that came to mind in listening to you say that is the climbs make the ridge lines that much more amazing. The hard work that it takes to get there. And that's the part of the people that drive their RVs right up to Old Faithful and stand there for 10 seconds. You miss that. You miss the work to get to the beauty. The book I was telling you earlier by Colin O'Brady, it's called The Impossible First. I think that's the name of it. But he puts it in terms of when he's out on his different excursions, that some days are ones and some days are tens, 10 being a great day. And you don't get to the tens without having the ones. You can't have one or the other. And really the ones are what make the tens so amazing. Yeah. But that's a big, and having teenagers myself, that's a big disconnect that I see with teenage kids and social media and kind of our culture in general of instant gratification. It makes sense that we have a culture that's way more depressed, way more anxious, way more removed from reality, because we want that instant 10 without living the ones and experiencing them. So I got all that from what you were just saying too, that you just got to keep plugging through it.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a guy named Jonathan Jarks. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a writer, sports writer that used to cover the Dallas Mavericks, and he maybe still does. I don't know, but he writes for The Ringer, which is a sports and pop culture website. And he became a Christian in his pretty late. He was like in his late 20s or maybe even early 30s. And more recently, like within the last, like maybe he became a Christian, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. And just in the last year, he got diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he's got like a 30% chance to live. And I was listening to him give an interview, and he said, you just have to make a decision every day. Like every day, you have to make a decision of what is the day going to be like, and you have to be optimistic or cynical, and it's not easy. But I think that like daily
choice, though, right?
Yeah, daily choice is big. And I think that's what I feel called toward, and trying to, I don't know, be light in the world would be to try to like make the right choice. And it's not easy, and you've got to make tough choices, and you've got to persevere, because otherwise you just, I don't know, you're going to drown pretty quick and you're in the challenges of the world and how negative everything can be.
So in thinking through all those things that you rattled off that you've done in the last 20, 25 years, what was the hardest moment? What was the time where you thought you were in the most precarious position and you weren't sure how it was going to turn out? When I say that, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I've done a lot of long distance running over the years, and I did a 100-mile race and 50-mile races, and some, like in May I did the Rim to Rim to Rim and the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that.
That was actually easier than doing a 38-mile stretch in Georgia on the Appalachian Trail, which people out west maybe don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. I loved it. It was great. The Grand Canyon was incredible, and it's as gorgeous as everybody says it is. I hadn't been there since 4th grade, so it's really a treat to get to go back out there. But the hardest thing was, I was doing, I guess it was 2 summers ago, I'd finished a section hike on the Appalachian Trail, and I ended up doing more miles than I was planning on, and averaging probably 23 miles a day for the first 5 or 6 days. And then the last day, I just got this wild hair and thought, I want to try to do 42 miles, because that's how old I was. I was 42 years old. And so I did that. And then I got home, and the big fish, the white whale for me forever has been this route in Western North Carolina called Pitchell. And it runs from, it's a blend of the names of 2 mountains, Mount Pisgah, which is like a 5,400 foot mountain southwest of Asheville, and Mount Mitchell, which is the tallest mountain east of the Mississippi, and it's almost 6,700 feet. And it's connected by the Mountains to Sea Trail, which runs all the way across North Carolina. But there's 100-something kilometer stretch between Mount Pisgah and Mount Mitchell. And one of my closest friends, Adam Hill, created this route called, they call them fun runs. And they're not really trying to be funny when they call them fun runs, but it is, because it just shows how like crazy and tough these people are. But so I wanted to do the Pitchell route for years, but I tore my ACL in 2011, and so I've always been, and my knee has been pretty good, but not, every now and then it flares up, especially on long runs. But I use hiking poles when I hike, and that 42-mile thing I did on the Appalachian Trail, I think gave me enough of a confidence to think maybe it's like now or never. Maybe I can try to do Pitchell. And so I talked to Jen, and she said, yeah, like you can do it. And so I waited. I think I finished my hike on the Appalachian Trail on a Saturday, and then the next Friday. So I just took off 5 or 6 days. I didn't do anything physically. I think maybe I got out for a 3-mile jog one day or something. But then I decided to try Pitchell, and I started at 7 o'clock at night, because you don't want to finish when the state park at Mount Mitchell is going to be open. And I knew I couldn't go super fast because my knee would hurt bad on these downhills. And there were quite a few tough spots, but definitely the toughest was about the halfway route or the halfway point, I got there at maybe, I don't know, 4:30 in the morning, and I had stashed some food and water, and I got there and somebody had stolen the food. And I was so frustrated, and I knew it wasn't like an animal because it wasn't torn up. It was just these certain things were gone. And but I knew I had a friend who was going to come out and meet me at 6 o'clock and do I don't know, five or 6 miles with me. And so I just texted him and said, "Can you bring me some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches?" And he did. And so that was huge, just to have this low point and then have a friend come out and help. And then the other low point was about 18 miles later. Jen has a real good term. Not that it's a clunky name, but I think the idea is brilliant. It's called the almost end. And it's like, before you get to the place where you can see the finish line, you're going to have this time when it's really difficult and you're like in no man's land. And that's where I was. I was probably 48 miles into this run, and I'd been going for who knows how many, like 15, 16 hours, and I'm not feeling great. And I'm not close enough to where I know, all right, I'm going to be able to finish this thing. There was still, the result was still in the balance. And I was like, I'd gone up this really tough climb called Lane Pinnacle and was coming down toward Craggy Gardens and Bee Tree Gap. It's a really pretty spot, but I was coming down toward that and really having the biggest low that I was having. And then toward me comes this other friend of mine who is a runner and who's actually the guy that I did the Grand Canyon with back in May. But he came running toward me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to see you." And when you're running with somebody, it's just a distraction. Like you're distracted from the pain and the challenge. And so he ran with me for a couple of hours, maybe not even that long, but it was just such a motivator. And then once I got to the Blue Ridge Parkway and crossed, I had at that point maybe 10 or 12 miles to go. And I was like, okay, I think I can finish this. But in both cases, I was like, I was really struggling. And I had friends who were able to pull me out and help me. And that was really amazing to have that kind of friendship and support. And there again, like the metaphor of like sometimes in life you need friends, you need people to snap you out of it. But I also think that the neat thing about that adventure was I wasn't ready. I was because I was almost like one of those defibrillators. Like I had shocked my body into shape I had done 240 miles or so and maybe not quite that far, 220 miles in a week on the Appalachian Trail. And then I waited 5 or 6 days, and then I went out and that was my favorite thing I've ever done because it was the toughest thing, and it was the thing that I didn't think I could do. And there's different levels of adventure. Like I don't think I would try to cross Antarctica because I'm just not equipped for that. But like when you find ways to push yourself, you're also gonna see you grow and you get stronger and you stretch and then you can take those lessons home and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And I've got a photo of that finish on my desk next, because then I'm able to think about, like, when I look up and see it, it's like, all right, well, what does work have today that's like this? And it's not like I think about that all the time, but it's just I do think that seeps into your life and these lessons and the ability to like embrace challenges is what I get out of having adventures. And I think also it's really important to read about other people's adventures, but it's more important for you to have smaller adventures. Yeah. Then you don't have to go to Antarctica, but like figure out something in your life that'll push you and do that. Maybe it's like hiking the Appalachian Trail section of the Smokies, or maybe it's hiking around a lake 5 or 6 miles, like whatever. It's just important to create. Everybody needs adventure in their lives, and it makes you feel wild and energized, and it's a reset button. And there needs to be that discomfort to counteract all of the comfort that we have, that we take for granted every day.
That's great. What a good summary of what I sometimes I call it nature therapy. Like things make more sense after I get out and run on the trail by our house or finish a backpacking trip. Is that why you do it? What is your why right now for why you pursue these different things?
Yeah, that's why I do it. I think it's just because I think there's an emotional and a spiritual benefit to being outdoors for me that I don't get in, like, I don't have a gym membership and I just think I love working out, but when you do something outside in nature, I get something more from that emotionally and spiritually than I would from another type of working out if I was lifting weights or running on a treadmill. And there's times when you don't have. In fact, right now, like I just don't run on trails as much. Where we live now. I don't know if you can hear the insects. They're pretty noisy, but it's a little bit farther from the trail. But so I run around the roads around our house more, and there's not a lot of traffic, and that's great. But I try once a week to get to a trail because there's just something different about running on a trail. And I think it's definitely a reset and whatever you want to call it, nature therapy, or just like the trees. Yeah, the trees feel good. They really are a lot more life-giving to me than glass and asphalt and so then so you try to figure out I've got to be in the glass and the asphalt. That's where my job is, and I need health insurance and all that stuff. So, but then you just have to figure out how to balance it. And I think one of the things that Jen says is, like, people are always asking her, how can I hike the Appalachian Trail? Like, I've got a job and her answer is usually, you can figure it out if you really want to do it. Like, anything you really want to do, you can find a way to do it. And maybe you can't hike the Appalachian Trail right now. Maybe you have to wait 5 or 10 years, but like, you can figure out ways to scratch the itch and get what you want in the more immediate short term. If you want it bad enough, and you do an inventory of your life and think about where you've got room to fit it in. So yeah, I'm a big fan of nature therapy because that's what I've benefited from it. Like the last 20 something years, it changed my life. So
I know in my own life, it's been 22 years since I graduated college, and that seems like a blink of an eye. Our oldest son actually just started in Chapel Hill. His first class is this week, and I'm moving him in. It was not that long ago that I was doing the same thing, but it was that long ago. And those years seem to, and as cliche as it is, they fly by. And something I've tried to focus more on in the last several years of my life is being really, really clear on what my first principles are. What you were just describing is, if you really want something, you're going to go get it.
Yeah.
But just through responsibility and routine and life going by, it's really easy to be unclear on what your first principles are and unclear on what it is that you really want. And then you don't do anything because you just don't have that clarity. So I hear from you a very clear description of what your first principles are, those priorities in your life, and you're making them work because they are those clear, important pieces of your own personal vision, not somebody else's, but things that you've come up with for yourself and for your family. So that's super encouraging for me, at least, to hear you say that, and knowing that we had a period of time where our lives intersected, and to hear how you've come from that and built the life that you got right now. And it sounds like everything that you've got going on is not only intentional, but exactly what you want out of it.
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to figure out how to balance everything, and especially the music stuff right now, because I'm taking a break from playing gigs because Jen travels so much, and that can be complicated if we have stuff that overlaps. But I think you just that there's constant evolution with your life, and having to figure out you've only got so much time. And I guess the metaphor, with using another trail metaphor, it's like your backpack. Like, you've only got so much space in your backpack, and the less you carry, the farther you're going to be able to go comfortably. So every now and then you need to do a pack shakedown and readjust and make sure that things are in the right place and that you're not carrying too much and that the things you're carrying are you're actually using. So yeah, I think that that's something that, I don't know. I think it is funny because I'm not like forcing these metaphors. Like they're genuinely things that I think about all the time. And maybe
you're a songwriter at heart, using metaphors to explain life.
Yeah, and I've also heard Jen give a lot of corporate talks, and we lead retreats and workshops here in Nashville a lot. So I do hear it, but I believe it, and I think it's true.
It's right on.
And so so it's definitely helpful to me as you keep like moving down the trail. What are the things in your pack, and what do you have in there, and what do you need to carry, and what can you let go of? So it's a constant. It's always changing, but that's good too, because changing it means you're growing and you're learning and you're not stagnant. Because I think that can be a danger, especially for us who are now having kids go off to college. You don't want to get complacent. So, and that's what you're doing with this podcast, I think. But you just keep evolving and trying to do things. Yeah, like do things that are meaningful and that add to your life and add to other people's lives. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, one dream I have is for one of my kids to go, hey, I think I want to go hike the PCT. You want to go with me? That would be awesome. And I know you get your kids out and explore with them, but folding that into something that I love to do, the parenting piece and spending time with the kids, and I can't make them want to be outside, but the more that I've taken them on backpacking trips, I see that interest grow in them and the things that they get out of it. But man, a couple of years ago, right in the middle of COVID, I took two of our kids up to Grayson Highlands for a couple nights, and we still talk about that. Remember that part and remember this. And this fall, my daughter that was with me we've scheduled to go back there with one of my friends here that I backpack with and his daughter, who's the same age. And we're going to go back up and see the wild ponies and spend a couple of nights up there. But because my daughter wanted to do that, not because it was something that obviously I'd go anytime, but that's really a fun piece to have, that sort of personal passion, but folded into still spending time with my kids as well in the middle of it.
Yeah. It's I think our kids our son is now 5. And so he's finally at the age where he loves being outdoors and he loves hiking almost more than our 9-year-old daughter does. But yeah, it's really fun for them to be at the age where they like it. And I think we would love for our kids to want to do long distance trails, but with Jen being so dyed in the wool in it, and me too at this point, we don't want to force it on them. And I think it's something that, first of all, hiking it's like a acquired taste that you get more of a taste of the older you get. You appreciate it more, and maybe you don't need the flashiness or I don't know, like you're able to appreciate the subtleties of like spring wildflowers, although they're not really subtleties and they're incredible and they're gorgeous and showy, but now they are to me. And if I was a teenager, I'd be like, that's not impressive, because I've seen screensavers, and we're always like thinking about something that seems more impressive, but that's not really real life. But anyway, I think one of the things that we really are trying to do with our kids is teach them to appreciate nature and not force them into it as much as just introduce them to it. And then if they want to circle back to it when they get older, we would love for them to hike the Pacific Crest Trail with us, or if they want to take a semester off of college and we do the Appalachian Trail or Continental Divide Trail or shorter trails, like that would make us so happy. But we're not like expecting them to do it. We're just kind of giving them an introduction to it so that if they want to, they can.
Very cool.
And yeah, that's all you can do. I think you can't force it down their throats, you know?
Yeah. My experience has been anytime I get pushy with anything, it usually goes the opposite way of how I want it to.
Yeah, that's definitely I mean, we're not that far with our kids, but that's definitely what it seems like the phenomenon would be. So, and Jen's got several books that we co-wrote a book called Families on Foot, and then she wrote a book called The Outdoor School that's more for middle schoolers. She co-wrote a book with her friend Haley Blevins, and so there's definitely some expertise that we're bringing to it, but I think it's just important to not be too pushy and give them space.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to be mindful of your time, and we haven't even gotten to your adventures this summer, which you mentioned earlier. You did rim to rim to rim, but you also went overseas. Is that right? You and the family spent time. Was it Australia or New Zealand?
It was Australia. New Zealand we wanted to go, but it was closed until actually after we had planned the trip. But we spent a week and a half in Hawaii and mostly went to Haleakala National Park on Maui and to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park on the Big Island. So we were in Hawaii for a week and a half, and then we were in Australia for 3 weeks visiting national parks and staying with our daughter. Charlie she had a little third grade friend whose dad was Australian, and they were back there for the first time since before COVID to visit his family. So we were really lucky and hitched our wagons to them for a while and got to camp out and hang out with their friends and have a really like authentic Australian experience.
That's cool.
And yeah. And then the big reason why we did the trip was because we spent a week and a half in Fiji with water filter company called Sawyer that Jen's worked with. Yeah. Jen's worked with them for years, and they have these clean water projects all over the world. And a lot of people in the outdoor industry know all about Sawyer, but they don't know that they have been doing all these amazing things in remote parts of the world. And I think they wanted, so we went and did a service project and visited these villages for several days, and they brought a little 2-man documentary film crew to record it, and they're going to be releasing a documentary about that at some point, just to tell the story, because they've never done that, and all these people in the outdoor industry or in the outdoor world that buy Sawyer's products don't know of all the good that they're doing. So
great, I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, so it was really fun. It was a really fun summer. We were tired when we finished it. I don't know if it was because we weren't used to traveling overseas or who knows, but we had an amazing time, and there were a whole lot of highlights, but I think the biggest was just getting to spend time with the folks in Fiji, and it was such a different culture. And I feel like at some point in our lives, everyone in the U.S. should go to another country that's not in the developed world and see what it's like there, because you want to talk about people being tough and resilient. There's just we take a lot for granted in the US, and everything from having guitar strings to put on when you break one to medicine, modern medicine and clean water, to all sorts of things, being able to have construction material to fix things when they break. And it's just, I don't know. It'd been a long time since I'd been to a country outside of Europe, so it was a really powerful experience just to see what it's like in another place where the income was probably, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 a year instead of $40,000.
Oh, man, probably very cool for your kids to experience also, because they're probably at an age where they'll remember that, or at least have a placeholder in their memories of being over there and what they saw.
Yeah, definitely true. And that was not lost on us, especially with our 9-year-old. I'm sure she'll remember it, and I'm hopeful that Gus will. He's about to start kindergarten. But part of it is how memorable the memories are.
Exactly.
We were like riding up a river in this boat that we're literally like plowing up these rapids on a little motorboat and in a canyon, and like looking up, and it's just so green and crazy. There are some really strong memories that hopefully will take root for the kids. But it was incredible, and we've been lucky to expose our kids to. Our daughter Charlie had been to all 50 states before she was 2, and we have just.
That's not normal.
That's
awesome.
It's not, and And we tell her that every day. We told her this summer she got to do that big trip. And then I took her to New York with my parents and my sister to go to some Broadway shows. And then she got to go to this summer camp in North Carolina. We were like, you can't tell any of your classmates about any of this stuff. Jen's already been coaching her because she goes to normal public school. And when they're like, what did you do this summer? I went to Fiji in Australia, and I got to go see The Music Man with Hugh Jackman. And we're like, you can't, you have to just say, I did a service project. And
I had a great summer.
Some cultural. So we've been coaching her up on that stuff. But yeah, it was an amazing summer. And I think back to the adventure thing, it wasn't anything we'd planned to take 6 weeks off and just travel. But I'm really glad we did it. And I would do it again in a heartbeat, because when you have opportunities to do something like that before you retire, if you can make it work, you need to do it. You never know when you're going to get that time. And I think we're really happy. We're really happy with the choices we've made with our lives, as far as like never putting something off. Like don't postpone an adventure. If you got the means to make it happen, I think it's really great. And like you said, with going to Grayson Highlands, those memories is what you're creating with your kids. And I think that's just going to be it's going to pay dividends as they get older, and hopefully have these things that you can connect with them over as they mature.
Absolutely. All right. Let me land the plane here and ask you one last question.
Okay.
If you've got an adventure bucket list, what's at the top?
Oh man, that's a good question. Okay, so right now it sounds funny. I'm really happy. We went overseas, and I was just saying it's so important for people to see other parts of the world and appreciate what we have in the U.S. But at the same time now, I'm really happy to just stay in North America for a while. And the thing that I want to do, and also this is like what I want to do kind of points toward our place in life right now with our kids, and trying to lean into the fact that we've got them at home, and that's a really neat thing. But my daughter, Charlie, who's 9, she and I have had this like dream for a couple of years to go up to Yellowknife, Canada. And we picked that place because it's like there's a road that goes up there, and it's the farthest away you can get from anything on a road. Like you could technically fly into it, and we might do that, but it's so far north and it's so cold. And we just want to see what that's like. I don't know if we'll go up there. We might go up in the summer when the road's open and just drive, and it would take us like a week to drive up there, and then we'd spend 3 or 4 days, and then we'd take another week to drive back. Or we might fly up there in the winter and see what it's like to have like negative 50-degree temperature. But I think like having adventures with the kids is where we are right now, and just trying to lean into that and make memories with them has been really special. And our kids are great travelers. They do really well. We were gone for 6 weeks and camping out, and our daughter, we were in the Everglades in April, and we were asking her, how do you guys feel about camping out and doing some sea kayaking in the Everglades? And Charlie said, if there's a tent and there's s'mores, I'm happy. And then our son recently, when we were camping out in Australia in a national park, he had the best line. He's 5 years old, and he said, this is just like a hotel, except the floor is dirt. And that makes me really happy. Like when they say things like that
absolutely,
it's like, all right, we're doing something right. They're really embracing this life of adventure. So
that's cool.
It's cool. Yeah.
Look forward to see where that takes your family. And you said it's called Yellowknife, Canada.
Yeah,
I've
it's way up it's way up like it's way out west. But
okay.
Yeah, it's a long way up there. Yeah, but yeah, you can see the aurora borealis in certain times of the year. So anyway, yeah, thanks for having me on, Josh.
Brew, this was awesome. I hope we can find a way to intersect that on the trail sometime and maybe do a trip together.
I would love that.